Been told she must remove her full face veil while giving evidence. Lawyers for the woman, who can't be identified for legal reasons, claim that taking off her veil would breach her human rights. But the judge ruled that the jury must be able to see the defendant. Joining me now from Glasgow is Yasmin Alibaya-Brown, columnist for The Independent, and from our studio in Paris is the French journalist Nabila Ramdani. Thank you both very much indeed for taking the time to discuss this with me. Yasmin, to you first of all, the judge in this case said that he hoped the government would take a stand on this soon because it was very difficult for individual courts to make decisions on this issue. Is this a subject that the government should address, in your opinion?
I certainly think it has been ignored for too long. I think we have to look at various institutions, courts, hospitals, schools even, and decide, I think collectively, first of all, we need a national debate about this. You know, I wrote my column in The Independent today saying this is nothing to do with anything that Islam says. It is in none of our sacred texts. This is importing Saudi Arabian practice of Islam to Britain. We need to look at this, and we need to say in institutions where the face absolutely has to be seen, it's not on. It's just not on.
Well, let me bring Nabila Ramdani in at that point. Do you think that the government should examine this, should make a ruling on this?
Well, I think that the British will certainly see that as a sinister attempt, you know, by the government, if it was to legislate on such a matter, to intervene and indeed interfere with religious matters. And the British are very you know, they wouldn't, I don't think that's something that the British are very fond of. And I think that the judge's decision, in my opinion, was quite fair and reasonable and above all else pragmatic. And I think issues like this one should be looked at on a case-by-case basis. And I think a blanket legislation setting a precedent for Muslim women in general would be quite misleading and indeed would set a very dangerous precedent as far as religious freedoms are concerned.
I suppose the question I would put to you there, Nabila, again, is in British society, is it not reasonable to expect, for example, in the case of someone appearing in the courts, that if they are giving evidence, that the jury should be able to see their face? I mean, that is just normal custom and practice. It has nothing to do with sort of disrespecting anyone's faith.
Well, yes, absolutely, and I'm by no means an advocate of the full veil. And as I said, I think the judge's decision was fair, was reasonable, was pragmatic, and he indeed asked the defendant to show her face while giving evidence, and I think he also allowed her to keep on her full veil during the trial. So I think that's an excellent example of a good compromise based on a specific case.
Yasmin, you're clearly disagreeing with that.
No, I don't think you should ask judges and doctors and teachers to have to do this. We live in a society, yes, where we have freedoms, but we also have to live by certain principles. The veil says something about the woman. It places her as a threat to men and to society. In the name of gender equality, that can't be acceptable. We Muslims are lucky to be living in societies where we have freedoms. But I think for too long we've kind of exploited those freedoms and pushed societies. We have to compromise. We have to compromise too.
Does Britain need to go down the road of, Yasmin, of France and of Belgium and introduce a ban on wearing a full veil in public?
I think the ban is such a hard word. I really don't like the word ban, but I have met French schoolgirls, Muslim French schoolgirls, who were delighted, actually, when the government said they didn't have to wear the headscarf. So this idea that they stopped going to school and so on is just false. I think what we can say is that in public institutions, and maybe even some private institutions, there are dress codes. There are acceptable things and unacceptable things that individuals can do with all their freedoms. We live in a society, you know. We can't be a nation within a nation.
The point that our correspondent Rita Chakrabarti was making in her report on this story earlier, well, she posed the question, what are the limits of freedom in a multi-faith society? And it seemed to me that was a very good question, a very good starting point, if you like, to begin the debate on this. Nabila, what are the limits of freedom in a multi-faith society? Should there be limits?
Well, I think, yes, indeed, and there should be, there's no such thing as absolute freedom. There should be, of course, legal boundaries, and as it stands, full veils are not forbidden in British society. But I think what I found the most astonishing is that this call for debate on a national debate on full veils, and indeed potentially leading to a ban of full veils in the public space, was initiated by a liberal Democrat, and this is, of course, very much at odds with liberal values of live and let live, and indeed very much at odds with the very core values of British society, and indeed respect of religious freedoms, which are, people look at Britain around the world and they respect Britain for allowing that kind of freedoms which are denied elsewhere, including in a country like France. And I think the danger would be, by initiating such a debate, that it would be used as a device to stigmatize Muslims and Islam, and indeed criminalize what are in the end shy, modest women and devout women.
Yasmin, you were shaking your head in disagreement at the idea that this was at odds with liberal values.
Well, I think, you can't just pick and choose the liberal values and then which suit certain kinds of imposed lifestyles. Most Muslims I know really fear the growth of this kind of Islam, and what they're using liberalism to promote illiberalism. And I think that just cannot go on. It's increasing by the day. I've seen 3-year-olds with heads covered up. That's not a choice. And it's not just about Muslims. A girl in a bikini couldn't go to the court and give evidence. I think there is a debate to be had about the Hasidic Jewish community. I think we have to agree on common values.
I'm afraid we have run out of time on this discussion, but Yasmin Alibhai-Brown there in Glasgow and Nabila Ramdani in Paris, thank you both very much. And we're going to take you